Hello everyone, my name is Nuur Salsabilaa and I'm an English Studies student. With that in mind, I'm going to tell you about something I've learned in my class. According to Robert Frost, an American poet, a poem must reach the eye, the ear, and what we may call the heart of the mind. It is most important of all to reach the heart of the reader. In other words, a poem must be able to create vivid images, sounds, and emotions to touch the heart of its readers. As a critical reader of this Portuguese poem, I would like to analyze the techniques, strategies, and methods used by the poet in order to create certain effects on our hearts and emotions. Having said that, I choose to come up with my own interpretation of the 27th and 28th stanzas from Canto 4th. I find these stanzas to be extremely haunting and beautifully worded and full of tension. The anticipation and fear that comes before facing potential death in the battleground are painted in such captivating lines. I have some questions that I'd like to figure out as I dissect these stanzas. Number 1, who is the speaker in the poem? From whose point of view? Number 2, what is the theme of the poem? Number 3, what is the tone or mood of the speaker? Number 4, how does the poet paint the imagery in these stanzas? And number 5, are there any symbols and figure of speech? And lastly, number 6, are there any sound effects and rhymes? Before we get into the answers, I'd like to read the stanzas first. So here we go.
Respondem as trombetas mensageiras, pífaros sibilantes e a tambores. Alferezes volteam as bandeiras, que variadas são de muitas cores. Era no seco tempo que nasceras. Seres o fruto deixa aos lavradores. Entra em astria o sol no mês de agosto. Baco das uvas tira o doce mosto. Deu sinal a trombeta castelhana. Horrendo, fero, ingente e temeroso. Ouviu o monte, altabrou e guadiana. Atrás tornou as ondas de medroso. Ouviu o Douro e a terra transtagana. Correu ao mar o tejo duvidoso. E as mães que o som terrível escutaram. Aos peitos os filhinhos apertaram.
And now, let's get into the first question. Who is the speaker in the poem, and from whose point of view? The speaker in the poem is Vasco da Gama, who's telling the story of the Aljubarrota battle to the kings in Portugal. This epic poem was written by Luís de Camões and was published in 1572. Question number 2. What is the theme of the poem? Os Lusíadas is an epic poem with the theme of modernity. Camões refers constantly to the great achievements of classical empires in order to highlight the greatness of Portuguese due to their greater military might and technological advantage. On to the third question. What is the tone or mood of the speaker? In the 2 stanzas I chose, the tone of the speaker is depressing, scary, and traumatizing. Fourth question. How does the poet paint the imagery in these stanzas? So there are 5 types of imageries: visual, auditory, olfactory or smell, gustatory or taste, and tactile imagery or touch. I'm going to talk about each stanza separately. I'll talk about the 27th stanza first. The 27th stanza uses 3 types of imageries: visual, auditory, and gustatory. In the first 2 lines, the poet uses auditory imagery. The clangor of the trumpet sounds, the fifth shrill, and the rough rattling of the drums. And then, the 3rd to 7th line, the poet uses visual imagery. The soldiers are waving their flags, they vary in lots of colors. It was in the dry weather on the threshing floors. Ceres leaves the harvest to the farmers. The sun enters Estrella in August. And finally, the last line is a gustatory or taste imagery, when Bacchus draws out the sweet taste of the first grape. Next, the 28th stanza. There are two types of imagery here, visual and auditory. The first, third, fifth, and seventh lines use auditory imagery. The Castilian trumpet gave the signal, Mount Altabro heard it, also Guadiana, Douro and Transtagana heard it, and the mothers who heard the terrifying sound. The fourth, sixth, and eighth lines use visual imagery. They run back, they're terrified. The scary Tagus River ran into the sea, holds their children closely to their chests. Question number 5. Are there any symbols and figures of speech? Yes, there are multiple symbols and figures of speech in these two stanzas. In the 27th stanza, there are 3 symbols, Ceres, Astrea, and Baco. Ceres is the goddess of agriculture in Greek mythology who symbolizes fertility, agriculture, and harvest. And Astrea is the daughter of Astreus and Eos in Greek mythology. She ascended to heaven to become the constellation Virgo. Based on the Julian calendar, the calendar Camus used, the Battle of Aljubarrota happened during the Virgo season on the 14th of August, 1385. And the last symbol in this stanza is Bacchus. Bacchus is the god of wine in Greek mythology, meaning that the Battle of Aljubarrota happened when the grapes are ripe. The author uses names of the gods and goddesses from Greek mythology to inform the readers regarding the season and time where the battle took place, which happened during the Virgo and dry season. In the 28th stanza, there are 4 symbols and a type of figure of speech, Altabro, Guadiana, Douro, and Transtagana. Altabro is a cape in Galicia and is currently called Ortega. Guadiana is a river in Portugal and Spain that in some parts marks the territory between the two kingdoms. Douro is a region in the north-northeast of Tugal. Transtagana is the region beyond the Tagus River. These geographical symbolisms are very important since we can pinpoint or interpret where the battle took place. The figure of speech used in this stanza is personification, which is a literary device that gives human characteristics to non-human things or inanimate objects. The trumpet sound is depicted as scary in these 2 lines. Deu sinal a trombeta castellana, horrendo, feru, ingente e temeroso. Then the geographical landmarks are depicted as a person who hears the trumpet sounds. Ouviu o monte Altabro e Guadiana. Mount Altabro heard it, also Guadiana River. Ouviu o Douro e a terra Transtagana. Douro and Transtagana heard it. And finally, the last question. Are there any sound effects and rhymes? Yes, there are rhymes, especially in the last syllable in each word of each line. In both stanzas, the rhyme is A, B, A, B, A, B, C, C. The 27th stanza goes like this. Mensageiras, atambores, bandeiras, cores, eiras, lavradores, agosto, mosto. And in the 28th stanza, it goes like this. Castellana, temeroso, Guadiana, medroso, Transtagana, duvidoso, esquitaram, apertaram. All in all, these 2 stanzas have many imageries, symbols, and rhymes in order to really convey the terrifying tone of the poem, while at the same time, everything is wrapped up so beautifully in a very poetic way. The poet uses a few Greek mythology references as well as geographic landmarks. The imageries that are used in these 2 stanzas are visual, auditory, and gustatory imagery. The 27th and 28th stanzas of this poem by Luis de Camões catch my eye the most because their creative imagery and the interesting way to express the horror of war, as well as telling us the location of the battlefield.